Okay, so I admit it, I'm terrible at baseball. Come to think of it, I'm terrible at most sports. But that's okay, because the main character in the film I'm reviewing today is also a crap athlete, just like me. So, let's take a swing at this computer-animated baseball cartoon, shall we?
Everyone's Hero is an American-Canadian animated sports adventure feature film, co-directed by the late Christopher Reeve, who is best known as Superman/Clark Kent in the 1978 film Superman and its sequels. Unfortunately, Reeve, who had lived with a severe disability for most of his later life, died during production of Everyone's Hero. So, animators Colin Brady and Daniel St. Pierre took over the directing reins and helped finish the movie. What's it about, you may be asking? Well, Yankee Irving is a little boy that's terrible at baseball and the other kids refuse to play with him. However, Yankee is crazy about baseball despite his lack of talent. His father happens to work at the Yankee Stadium and his hero is the Sultan of SWAT himself, Babe Ruth. So, when Babe's legendary bat, Darling, is stolen by Lefty McGinnis, a player from a rival team, Yankee's father is fired because he was on security duty on the night it was stolen. To make sure Babe returns to his formula winning streak and to help his father get his job back, Yankee travels America with a talking baseball called Screwy to get Darling back to Babe. Before I state my thoughts on this movie, I must give a spoiler alert for my review in advance because I do go into detail about the finale for this movie. So, if you don't want to know what happens in the climax of Everyone's Hero, then click stop now. Okay, so this is a film that really captures a sense of nostalgic charm through the setting of its time period. It really embraces the aesthetics of its era, the 1930s, through the designs of its costumes, sets, props, and art direction. What about the comedy in this movie? Well, while there can be a heavy reliance on cheesy puns and contrived overplayed slapstick that lacks any subtlety, sometimes the physical humor can be very clever, through the interaction between characters and sets, particularly in a chase scene on some train carriages. I have to also admit that I did laugh out loud at times at some of the jokes, although it was rare for me to be impressed or entertained by the comedy in this movie. It tries way too hard because it thinks that its audience will be bored if there's no talking or comic violence to keep their attention. Give your audience some credit, jeez. Not everyone has the attention span of a bloody goldfish. There's another problem that I have. You see, for an adventure movie, there's not much adventure going on. It's a film made up of characters running, bickering, and some slapstick encounters with the antagonist. So yeah, it wasn't exactly thrilling to watch for me. An adventure movie needs to have memorable set pieces, development of characters, and building of relationships. An adventure movie also needs to explore various interesting places to make the journey come across as colourful and exciting. But Yankee doesn't seem to explore many places except for a suburban house, an abandoned building, and a hotel in Chicago. That's about it. Sure, he does arrive at a baseball stadium, but this isn't until the end of the movie. The writers haven't really expanded the world much for Yankee for a majority of the movie. In addition, while there is an imaginative reason for the magical existence of Darling the Bat, which I'll explain later on in this review when I go through the characters, I don't understand how Screwy has the ability to talk and have conscious awareness. If you're going to attach a fantasy element to one talking object, then at least apply it to the other. Without an explanation, I found it distracting that I didn't know how Screwy was alive. Sure, many of you will argue that it's easy to accept talking objects in an animated movie, but it depends on the universe of the animation. In Pixar's Toy Story, we believe that the toys are alive because no fantasy backstory is supplied, so we accept that these toys are alive for no logical reason. We don't feel a need to question their ability to think or talk. Unlike Everyone's Hero, which does add a fantasy backstory to one talking object, but leaves the other talking object to exist without a logical reason. It's like if in Toy Story we were told that Woody was alive thanks to the power of voodoo magic. Seeing as he would be the only one with an explanation for his consciousness, wouldn't you be questioning why the other toys were alive too? It's also never explained why Yankee can hear Darling and Screwy, but no one else can. This was distracting and I felt like I needed to know the reason why, seeing as a fantasy element had been introduced in the film. Now, one could make the theory that Screwy and Darling are from Yankee's imagination. It's a believable idea seeing how creative kids can be, but as we see in one shot, others can see them move about, so I have to deny this theory personally. However, complaints aside, there's actually a lot of entertainment to gain from the cameo characters that pop into the film, like a group of eccentric bums, a quirky little girl called Marty, and some imaginative baseball players. These little bit part characters add a bit of fun to the film. In fact, these minor characters are far more likable and interesting than the main characters. It's also sweet to see some of these characters teach baseball to Yankee in their own unique ways. It's their encouragement and criticism that helps him improve. It gives them a purpose in the film. These lessons also come into good use when Yankee has to play for the Yankees, if I say that, in a surprisingly tense game that I found myself engaged in. Why? Well, we see Yankee's nerves reflected in the shaking of his body. We know the stakes are high because he's batting for his hero's team, and the pitcher is lefty himself, so things are personal. Now, sure, it seems like a ridiculous scenario for a pro sports athlete to put a child in his place during an important game, but the team has already gone through a losing streak, so I can't blame them for being so desperate. However, I can see why other audience members would find the concept to be silly, because yeah, it is a tad far-fetched when you think about it. If only there were more sports scenes like this in the movie, because it's the only part of the film that gripped my attention, and that's a high compliment coming from someone who isn't a sports fan. The final message of the film is to keep swinging no matter how bad you start off. This is a fantastically motivating lesson to give, because yes, practice is essential to improvement. This is also something that Babe Ruth himself taught to others.
Baseball is just like life. Yesterday, Freddie was a failure. Today, he's a big hero. It just goes to show if you keep on trying, you'll come out on top as Freddie did.
So I believe that this message fits nicely into the movie. I should address the theme of family values in this movie because it is a strong focus at times. You can tell that Yankee cares for his family, enough to risk a crossroad adventure to help his father restore his job. This is a believable kind of love that Yankee feels because the movie does a great job establishing the father-son relationship between both characters. The way that they interact shows that there's a strong bond between them and a sense of respect for one another. It's a touching relationship that's written realistically without any contrived over-sentimentality. Okay, so let's go through the main characters in detail. Yankee is good-hearted, sweet, confident, and shows a variety of emotions. However, we don't learn anything about him except for the fact that he loves baseball. And sure, the fact that he's terrible at baseball helps me pity him, but I found it hard to be interested in his life because he's not developed further than being just a little boy who likes baseball. What else is there to him? What other things does he enjoy outside baseball? What are his flaws, quirks, or bad habits? These things aren't developed and hinder him from being anything more than the character he's first introduced as. Sure, he develops as a sportsman, but he doesn't develop as a character. Screwy can be a bit annoying. Scratch that, really annoying. He's way too talkative and keeps making bad jokes, mainly ball puns, but he has his own dream, to be a home run ball. However, he can be selfish, loudmouthed, and bitterly aggressive, so I really don't care about his dream. While he does develop a sense of consideration and optimism towards the end of the film, we still have to deal with him being obnoxious, over-talkative, and cynically harsh. He's just not nice company to have for 3/4 of the film. Darling's reason for being magically enhanced is epic. It goes like this, okay? Born of a 3,000-year-old tree on the side of Mount Olympus, struck by lightning and carved by monks with the horn of a unicorn. How awesome is that? Awesome! While there's some spark to her personality, Darling has the same habit as Screwy. She refuses to shut the hell up and give a moment's peace to the audience's ears. However, she can be funny, surprisingly, like when we see that her mobility is limited to refrained circular rolling, and she does take the time to support Yankee when he misses his family. She's certainly far more likable than Screwy, but that doesn't excuse her reliance on being an obnoxious chatterbox to supply 90% of her character's entertainment. Lefty isn't a great villain. In fact, he's rubbish. His entire character trait is that he falls over all the time or gets himself hurt, making him come across as weak and soft. His motive is driven by the desire to please his boss. That's a very dull motive that doesn't add anything to his character except a sense of neediness. So let's add this up. He's needy, clumsy, and weak. That's not threatening or intimidating. I would feel pity for him, but we also don't get to know him much before he is granted this task, so we don't A. root for him, B. care that he pleases his boss, C. care about what even happens to him. He comes across as a desperate goof rather than a dangerous antagonist. That's not scary. A villain needs to have a sense of menace and threat to come across as intimidating. Lefty's boss, Mr. Cross, is very fun and energetic, but his main role as an antagonist is to demand and order. He stays out of the main plot until the end of the film. So I would label Lefty as the main antagonist in this movie. Marty, on the other hand, a baseball player's daughter that Yankee meets, is a wonderful character and deserved far more screen time. Why? She's clever, tough, practical, and enriched with a sparky personality. However, she's not a token tomboy. She's caring, sensitive, and still dresses feminine despite her love of sports. This adds something unique to her as a character, makes her stand out when compared to other characters of her kind. It's a shame that she has barely any scenes because she's perhaps the most likable character in the movie. Characters aside, this movie is beautifully rendered and well animated. I mean, considering how Screwy is just a ball and Darling is just a bat, both without limbs or joints, it's impressive that the animators can give them both so much flexible emotion in their animation. Plus, other CGI models are given just as much attention. What about the voice acting? Jake T. Austin is decent as Yankee. He displays a wide range of emotions throughout the film. Although he does get into a habit of putting too much eager excitement into some lines that need to be reserved, he's okay, I guess. I mean, I've heard far worse child actors before. Filmmaker Rob Reiner, best known for directing such movies as Misery, This Is Spinal Tap, and The Princess Bride, was cast as Screwy. It's an odd casting choice, but Reiner had acting experience before, and he sounds a bit like Rodney Dangerfield in his delivery, which does work for the vaudeville-style humour that his character displays. There's nothing much to say about Whoopi Goldberg as Darling. She's just her usual Whoopi self. And that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. While I do find Whoopi's trademark performance to be charming, she doesn't seem to extend her acting skills in this role, or try something new or unusual. However, blame for that could be aimed at the directors for not challenging her in the first place. William H. Macy is decent as Lefty, but there's not much material for him to work with, and it's a shame. Macy is a hyper-talented performer that's above a character like this. Most of his dialogue is made up of groans, moans, and agitated pain. Give the guy some dignity! Raven-Symoné is surprisingly impressive. She's emotive, energetic, and balances her emotions clearly. There's also plenty of personality and life in her delivery. I was taken aback by this because I've never witnessed a performance this good from her before. There's also an uncredited Robin Williams as Mr. Cross, who is impressive as always through the manic energy in his delivery, and it's refreshing to hear him as an animated villain for once, rather than an animated comic supporting character. Although, he does have a habit of hamming up his lines, so sometimes I have no idea what he's saying. It's important for a voice actor to come across as clear and easy to understand. What about the soundtrack for everyone's hero? Well, the original score is okay at times, but it can suffer from forced whimsy. By this, I mean that it tries too hard to come across as enchanting, and ends up being cheesy from time to time. Especially when it uses that annoying sparkle sound that I don't like. This sound gives the impression that the composer is demanding that the audience feels enchanted. There are a few little pop songs in the background that aren't too distracting and fit the tone of the scenes they're applied to. Sometimes they're even relevant. However, one of the songs plays over dialogue, and I find this annoyingly distracting when this happens in films. What am I supposed to be concentrating on? The singer's lyrics or the characters talking? Don't confuse me, movie! To conclude, everyone's hero can be dull at times, with a heavy focus on bitter bickering between the talking objects and overplayed slapstick from half the cast. Most character development is left for the third act instead of all the way through the movie. The lead characters are either undefined or far too annoying, plus Lefty is a rubbish villain. There's also a gaping hole in its fantasy aspect. However, I have seen far worse movies than this one. The animation is outstanding, there's a touching father-son relationship that reflects the power of family values, the final climax is exciting despite the contrivance of its situation, the supporting and bit part characters are a lot of fun, the setting is wonderfully nostalgic, and the film's message is smart and well executed. I give it 3 baseball stars out of 5.